everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. It has been a while. It's been a long time coming since I've done my last video. Suffice to say, life has been crazy. I know I've said that a lot in the last 4 or 5 months, but it's absolutely true. However, now I'm finally in a new setup, ready to rock and roll. Hope you guys like the look of it. Also hope you like the new intro. That's going to be how we're doing it for the 2023 season. Before we get into what we're going to be doing today, I just want to say that I've really missed all the 49er fans out there, the interaction, the engagement with the fans, all the 49er content creators out there doing a whole bunch of good work. And more importantly, really than me being back, is that the Niners are back in training camp, which means football is right around the corner. There's already so many storylines to talk about. But what I'm going to focus on in this video here is going to be my 5 most intriguing training camp battles. I hope you guys will enjoy. I think that it goes without saying that the quarterback battle is going to be the most intriguing one and the most impactful battle in this training camp and preseason, but we're going to talk about that last. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to stay on the offensive side of the ball, but we're going to talk about the offensive line, and in particular, we're going to talk about right tackle. Now, we do have Colton McKivitz, who's somewhat, I would say, penciled into that position, but we all know pencils have erasers for a reason. There is a likelihood that free agent signing Matt Pryor could usurp a guy like Colton McKivitz if he has a good training camp and preseason. Now, to me, McKivitz definitely does have the advantage here, though. He's been with the team. This will be going into his 3rd, 4th year, I believe, with the team overall. In his time with the 49ers, he's had, he knows the system inside out, knows the coaching inside out, knows the scheme. And, the Niners clearly had some confidence and have a reasonable level of confidence with McKivitz simply because they were willing to let McGlinchey walk. And I don't think the Niners made any serious offer to keep Mike McGlinchey. I certainly wouldn't have kept McGlinchey at the price tag that he signed with Denver, but we didn't draft anyone very high. I know a lot of us fans wanted the 49ers to draft someone high. To me, that kind of shows confidence in a guy like McKivitz. However, we did bring in that competition in Matt Pryor, and we'll talk about him in a moment. But back to McKivitz. In his career with the Niners, he's played just over 400 snaps, only has 1 penalty, which is actually a really, really good rate to have, especially for someone who just doesn't play a lot of football. But I do like Colton McKivitz, and I think the Niners do have a lot of confidence in him. But let's talk about the competition that he has, and to me, we'll focus on Matt Pryor, who he brought in. Last 2 years at Indianapolis, before that with the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year did not go well for Matt Pryor. He really, really struggled, but he did play, and they moved him to left tackle, which I just don't think is his game at all. If you look at his time before that, even in 2021 with the Indianapolis Colts, predominantly played at right tackle and right guard, and actually graded out really, really well with PFF. Now, I know, as I always say, PFF is not gospel, but it does give you an indication of how a player has played. And I think Pryor looked pretty darn good in 2021, and I think the Niners are looking to get that kind of production out of a guy like Pryor if he is pressed into duty at right tackle. The one issue, though, that really sticks out when I was looking into Matt Pryor is he gets a lot of penalties, like year in, year out, penalties. But he did grade out really well in 2021, so to me that tells me that when he's not getting penalties, he's performing pretty darn well. Also didn't give up a sack in 2021. So that right tackle spot is going to be one to watch because the rest of the offensive line, well, the starting offensive line, is to me absolutely set in stone. Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, and those guys got a lot of experience. I'm talking about the interior guys. They all played about, 20 games last year, regular season and playoffs. So the big question, right tackle, who's going to win the battle? My money is on McKivitz, but will be intriguing to see Pryor, who does have quite a bit more experience playing than McKivitz. Can he take over? Keep an eye on that through August. The next training camp battle that we're going to talk about is going to be for the tight end position. Now, we know George Kittle, he is the guy, tight end number 1, arguably the best tight end in the game, so no worries there. The one thing there is to worry, though, is that he does tend to get banged up, miss some time, but also the 49ers in general like to run a lot of 2 tight end sets and to keep defenses guessing. So whoever that tight end number 2, number 3 are, That's going to be really important as the season goes on. We know it's a long season. So who are some of the options for that backup tight end spot? We got rookie Cameron Latou out of Alabama, 3rd round pick. Rookie Braden Willis out of Oklahoma. Then we have some of the veteran guys. Charlie Werner, who's been around, a blocking guy. Then you have Ross Dwelly, who's seemingly been with the team for years and years. Now, to me, this is going to be really, really intriguing, kind of as the video title suggests. I would have to say, just based purely on draft position, that Latou is going to be guaranteed a spot. I think a big question will be, does Kyle Shanahan want to keep 3 or 4 tight ends? Maybe we lean towards 3 just because we'll maybe want to keep extra guys on the offensive line. We're for sure going to have, the 3 quarterbacks, a lot of running backs, wide receivers. That's going to be an interesting battle there. But getting back to tight ends, I think Cameron Latou's spot is all but secure. So you have Kittle, you have Latou. And then after that, Werner, the blocking tight end, which Shanahan does like to have. We've seen Shanahan use Werner in blocking situations, in key situations. I think back to some of the playoff games over the last couple of years, and he really trusts Werner in that blocking role, even though I think Werner is solid there, if not spectacular. But last year, Werner struggled. He couldn't catch a ball. Remember that game against Atlanta? Easy drop for a lot of yards. Then we have Ross Dwelly, who's been around. Not a blocker by any stretch of the imagination, but just one of those guys who always seems to come up with a big reception, 1 or 2 big receptions every single year. So there is value there. But to me, the guy I really do like is Braden Willis out of Oklahoma. Versatile weapon, really, really athletic. Could be a better version of Ross Dwelly, especially if he can improve his blocking. So if the Niners keep 4 tight ends, I'm going to say Ross Dwelly probably the odd man out. If we only keep 3, then it's going to get really, really interesting there, because do you go with the 2 rookies behind George Kittle? I don't know. Maybe Willis, they try and sneak him onto the practice squad. But guys, keep an eye out on the tight end position, because that's going to be a big time battle with a lot of really fiery competitive players there. The next position that I want to talk about here is going to be who is the starting edge player across from Nick Bosa. There's a lot of different options that the 49ers have. And of course, as we like to do in San Francisco, and a lot of teams do it, is we like to have a really good rotation of edge rushers. That way you keep legs fresh, being able to get after the quarterback. But who's going to be the guy who earns the majority of the snaps? And essentially the guy who's going to replace Samson Ebukam. To me, the most likely guy, and the first guy we'll talk about, is Drake Jackson. He's second-year player out of USC. Now, in his rookie year, Drake Jackson a little bit more on the lighter side, really, really hyper-athletic, and that was on display a number of times throughout preseason and the regular season last year. He has bulked up a little bit. If he can do that while maintaining his athleticism, watch out. Second year of that Chris Cassera coaching, and I think there could be big things for Drake Jackson. Obviously, the 49ers really liked what he was capable of doing, taking him in the 2nd round of the 2022 draft. So hopefully he can take that leap forward, maybe not a Talanoa Hufanga type leap, but a significant leap. That would be huge for this 49ers defense, and just to take some of the load off Nick Bosa as well. Javon Hargrave will also help out with that quite a lot too. Now, and I do think that Drake Jackson is the odds-on favorite, but to me, a guy to watch out for is free agent Clelin Ferrell. He was a top 10 pick. Players with the Raiders have, we've seen it recent years where they haven't really done that well with the Raiders. They come here and they excel. Arden Key is a guy who comes to mind in particular, but again, with Chris Cassera, with all this talent around them, maybe Clelin Ferrell can finally realize some of that top 10 type potential. Now, do I think he's going to go on and have a Pro Bowl year? No, probably not. But I do like what he can bring to the 49ers. And if we can unleash that potential, that could be massive as well, even as part of a rotation. The next guy who I want to talk about, Austin Bryant, really intriguing pickup. Struggled with injuries a lot in Detroit, did have some moments, some flashes in Detroit, which show what he's capable of if he can stay healthy, and that's something that we have to say a lot here in San Francisco, but if he can stay healthy, he could be an absolute steal. We have the veteran Kerry Hyder, who we're familiar with over the last couple of years. Solid guy, rotation guy, not going to be getting a bulk of the snaps, but I think when it's in that, end of the 3rd, start of the 4th quarter, you want to get guys like Bosa and them some rest. That's when you bring in a Kerry Hyder. And last but not least, the player I want to talk about here on the edge, Rookie, Robert Beal Jr. out of Georgia. One of those kind of forgotten guys in the Georgia defense. They've had so many star players that he kind of just flew under the radar a little bit. Definitely has the skill set to fit in with what the 49ers do and want to do. And can he be the next 5th round pick that the 49ers just absolutely hit on? Hopefully, because we need to take some of that pressure off Nick Bosa when we go to rush the passer. Now, kind of bringing it all back in, to me, I think, look, Drake Jackson is the odds-on favorite guy. Not only does he have the athleticism, now he has the size, he has the coaching, he knows what we want to do here. I think he fits perfectly with what the Niners look for. But there's going to be some stiff competition, and that's a really good thing because it's one of those things throughout the course of a long season, you got to have that rotation, guys. There's going to be games where maybe Farrell gets the bulk of the snaps. Maybe other guys get the bulk of the snaps just to really ease the load a little bit. I'll be curious to see how we manage that load among the players. But this is going to be a great battle and one to keep an eye on, especially matching up with the first position that we talked about in right tackle, Colton McKivitz and Matt Pryor. Those battles really, really intriguing. Another good thing here is that we have Trent Williams at left tackle. So these guys, if they were going up against Trent Williams, who is the best tackle in football, that's going to help them out. You can go up against Trent Williams, you learn moves, try and defeat him. That could be really intriguing, but can't wait to see how the edge position really plays out once we get to week 1. The next training camp battle that to me is among the most intriguing is going to be at linebacker. Now we do, of course, have All-Pro Fred Warner. We have Pro Bowl caliber linebacker Dre Greenlaw. But who are going to be some of the other guys? Who's going to be that third linebacker that in base downs you might see on the field, basically filling in and taking over the Azeez Al-Shaair role? Not only that, but also taking over the role that should anything happen, hopefully not to Fred or Dre, that they would have to step in and play some meaningful snaps. Well, there are some really intriguing options here for the San Francisco 49ers. We have some veteran guys, some rookies. So let's kick it off with Oren Burks. Last year we brought him in as a free agent. He's definitely known for his special teams abilities, but I thought in limited duty last year at linebacker, he played pretty well. I remember the game against the Rams in LA. I think he had to fill in, maybe it was for Greenlaw, and I thought he played really, really solid football there. So impressive. He's a veteran guy. He's been around. I think he would be the odds-on favorite to be that third linebacker. Maybe he plays a little bit in base downs, would probably slot in and play significantly should there be an injury. But hopefully that guy who can, focus his abilities on special teams, allowing just Fred and Dre to do their thing. Now, if we do look at some of the other options at linebacker who the 49ers have, there are some couple of veterans and a couple of rookies. So the veterans that we're going to talk about now is Marcelino McCrary-Ball and Demetrius Flanagan-Foles. McCrary-Ball, to me, kind of plays the game like a hybrid linebacker safety type guy, hyper athletic. How stout is he against the run? Well, we'd like to see that, him really step up there when it comes to training camp, when it comes to preseason games. Can he earn a spot on the 53-man roster? He didn't last year, came pretty darn close, I thought. Can he do it this year? That'll be really intriguing. He has stiff competition in Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, a guy who, this coaching staff definitely seems to like. Is that still the case now with D'Amico Ryans no longer in San Francisco, now the head coach of the Houston Texans? I like Flanagan-Foles. To me, hyper-aggressive type player. Love the way he plays the game. But I think the fact that the 49ers drafted 2 linebackers this year, that to me speaks that the 49ers want to look at an upgrade, a possible upgrade at least. And the Niners have had a lot of success drafting in the middle, late rounds. You look at Warner, 3rd round pick. Greenlaw, 5th round pick. Azeez Al-Shaair is with the Titans now, undrafted free agent. So the Niners not afraid to look at later round picks with linebacker, identify them, and plug them in and play them almost immediately. That's what we saw with Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner, and look at how their careers have gone so far. So the rookies, we have D. Winters out of TCU, and we also have Jalen Graham as well. So both of these guys performed really well in college. I thought these guys were kind of both a steal at their position. D. Winters, end of the 6th round, made a number of big plays for TCU. Jalen Graham at the end of the 7th round. And the Niners, John Lynch has said that he considered taking Jalen Graham in the 6th round at that D. Winters spot, and we worked out and managed to get both of them. So really good job there by the 49ers front office to get both of these guys without having to give up crazy draft capital. So It's really, hard to say right now, just because training camp has literally just started. And that's when you can really see how these rookies perform and how they go up against these NFL players, guys who've been around the league for a while. But it's going to be a really interesting battle. I think that the Niners probably keep, maybe 5 linebackers on the 53-man roster. Warner, Greenlaw, obviously safe. Burks, I think, is safe. And then to me, on the 53-man roster, you have 2 spots. You have 4 players, 2 rookies, 2 veterans. I think you probably maybe get Winters and McCurry Ball, Winters DFF. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. But I think it's going to be a really intriguing battle, one that I'm going to be keeping my eyes on all the way throughout up until week 1. Alrighty, guys, we made it to the 5th and final, most intriguing training camp battle, at least in my opinion, for the San Francisco 49ers, and that is, of course, the quarterback position. And to me, look, it's going to come down to Brock Purdy or Trey Lance. With regards to Sam Darnold, we brought him in. I think it was a solid pickup, but to me, he's the number 3 guy. He's basically the guy where we learned our lesson last year that we can't go into an important game with even a guy as our backup like a Josh Johnson. We just can't. So we want to have 3 very capable quarterbacks on the roster. But going back to it, look, is it going to be Brock Purdy? Is it going to be Trey Lance? It's going to be a battle that's going to be really, really fun to watch. All the training camp reports, the preseason games, that's going to be so exciting to see how it all turns out. And to me, before we talk about each of the players, I do want to say that it doesn't matter to me who wins the job. I don't really care. To me, it just matters who is the guy who's going to give the 49ers a best chance to win a Super Bowl. Who's the guy? And that's what Shanahan has to ask himself. The Niners have such a quality, talented roster, top to bottom. But then Shanahan just has to ask himself that question. Who gives us the best chance to win a Super Bowl? Now let's get into and talk about Brock Purdy. So we know the Brock Purdy story, Mr. Irrelevant. Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt against Miami. Purdy comes in and basically lights up the league. Maybe he's not throwing like Mahomes type numbers necessarily, but when you look at the regular season and playoff games that Brock Purdy played in, won all of them, with the exception of the NFC Championship game, but we know what happened there. If we also exclude that game, the offense was averaging over 30 points per game in his starts and in the games that he played, which is just insane, and that would have been good for number 1 in the NFL last year. The offense ran really smooth. With Brock Purdy, there's a lot to like about his game. He's fearless. He hangs in the pocket till the last second, not afraid to take a hit. He has good accuracy, decent arm strength, good decision making, sneaky athletic. Not only can he run with the ball, but also can escape in the pocket. We saw, and he's just not afraid to make the difficult throw. Like, I think what kind of encompasses all of Brock Purdy's great qualities are that play where it didn't even result in a touchdown, but it should have. It was that game against, I believe it was it Seattle in the playoffs, where Purdy is basically running all around the pocket, inside, outside the pocket, and eventually just throws it to Ayuk after taking a shot. Ayuk should have caught it, corner of the end zone, perfect throw. Ayuk drops it, but that just to me kind of sums up Brock Purdy. Now, with all that being said, he's not perfect by any means. And if you look at what he did, he kind of got away pretty lucky actually. There should have been a lot more interceptions. Now, look, I can know that every quarterback throws passes that should have been intercepted, that get dropped or what have you. So that's not just unique to Brock Purdy, but he really did get away with some, especially if I look back. It was his first playoff game, and I get he's a rookie 7th round pick, but the first couple of drives against Seattle, he looked shaky. Should have easily been at least 1 interception there. But overall, I think Brock Purdy just played so well. And I think especially when you just factor in, rookie 7th round pick, really performed well. And you'd like to see what he can do given, essentially the full training camp and preseason and whatnot to be the starter for the Niners and just get him those reps. Now, what's happened is, of course, we've seen that like Lynch and everyone has come out and said that Brock Purdy fully cleared to practice. There's not going to be there's no holding him back, no restrictions, although they're also not going to have him practice 3 days in a row. It'll be, practice, day off, practice, so 2 out of 3, but he will be getting the QB1 reps when he is out there. Then you have Trey Lance, who I think is going to be getting the majority of the QB1 reps when Purdy is not out there. And let's pivot over to Trey Lance. So Trey Lance, to me, I think that what looked like he's just become really unlucky, unfortunately. I think when he was drafted number 3 overall, if you look at the situation he was coming into, and you're thinking Trey Lance, perfect situation. Kyle Shanahan's your head coach. You have Debo, Ayuk, Kittle. You know, what more can you ask for if you're a quarterback? You have Trent Williams blocking your blind side. That's perfect. And the Niners, I think, were pretty methodical and pretty intentional in how they wanted to develop Trey Lance. First year, they wanted to basically just let him sit, learn the scheme. He got to play a couple of games, played pretty well against Houston. And then just second year, then you basically hand the reins over. You hand him the keys to the franchise. And that's what the 49ers did. We know what happened week 1 against Chicago. I mean, you can say, look, the crappy weather, there was no Kittle, it was before we got CMC, so it's not a fair comparison to Purdy. All those things I think are pretty relevant, of course. But, what Lance needs is reps. And I think Lance has just so much potential. Like, his arm strength, he does have really good accuracy at times. Not perfect, but no quarterback is. But I just really love the potential. I think the ceiling with Lance is so high. But then again, you could argue that because with Purdy, because when Purdy was out there, we basically were running the NFL's highest scoring offense. So, although I think sometimes, you hear that old saying, I think it was Bill Parcells, that if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any. I think that if anything, what taught us last season is going through so many quarterbacks, you got to have at least 2. You better have 2. I don't have a particular rooting interest in who wins this job. I am highly intrigued by the battle, but I don't really care who wins it. I think there's pros and cons to both of these guys. I would be so intrigued to see Trey Lance out there with Kittle, with McCaffrey, with more reps. But also I think that Purdy, looked pretty darn good doing that too. So I just can't wait to see how it all shakes out. If I had to say, if I was a betting man, if I was putting money on it, who's my week 1 starter? I would say Brock Purdy, assuming health and all of that. But I just can't wait to see it. I hope that Trey Lance fights for his life. My only one concern with all of this is the fact that if they ultimately announce Brock Purdy as the starter week 1, does Trey Lance essentially demand a trade? I couldn't blame the guy. I wouldn't blame the guy. He's a guy who's a number 3 overall pick, was given the keys to the franchise last year. Now you're like, well, I got hurt. Now you're like, oh, yoink, there go the keys. I would probably demand a trade if I was him. Trey Lance just seems like the most upstanding, nice guy ever, that maybe he wouldn't want to do that. But I wouldn't blame him. So that's nothing really to factor into the decision necessarily of who should start week 1, but just something to think about in the background. But wow, yeah, this is going to be such a crazy training camp. Eyes are going to be just peeled and focused on my phone, on Twitter, X, throughout the next few weeks, praying for no injuries, of course. And I just can't wait for the season. And I'm just so glad to be back doing videos with all you guys. I just love doing this. And I'm going to be doing live streams because I think it's a lot better for that engagement with fans, with all of you, and gearing up for the NFL season, which is going to be here in the blink of an eye. But I just want to thank you guys so much for checking out the video, whether you're watching at home, whether you're listening on your commute, at work, working out, whatever. I really hope that you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on, let's say, my intriguing training camp battles, maybe some battles that I didn't talk about, maybe somewhere lower down the roster. I'd be really curious to see what you guys think. But again, thank you so much for checking out the video. And one thing that we're not going to change here is that I got 2 things to say before I head out. The butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.